What was the most racist rule at your school? The suspension slip hit Marcus's desk with a sharp slap that made half the class look up. 2 weeks. For the exact same thing Jake Morrison had done 3 days ago, and Jake got detention. I watched my best friend's face crumble as he read the yellow paper, and something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't even close to right. Mr. Williams will see you in his office immediately, Mrs. Peterson said, her voice carefully neutral. She wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes as he gathered his backpack, shoving his chemistry notebook inside with shaking hands. The classroom stayed dead quiet until the door clicked shut behind him. Then the whispers started. 2 weeks. For cheating on a quiz. That's so harsh. Remember when Jake got caught with those same answer sheets? He just had to stay after school for a week. I stared at the empty chair next to me, my mind racing back to Monday afternoon. Jake Morrison, captain of the lacrosse team, golden boy with the perfect smile and the BMW his parents bought him for his 16th birthday. I'd seen him pull out his phone during Mrs. Peterson's quiz, thumb-typing answers he'd definitely photographed earlier. When she caught him, he'd given her that sheepish grin and said, "Sorry, Mrs. P, won't happen again." Detention. 1 hour after school for 5 days. But Marcus who spent his weekends volunteering at the animal shelter, Marcus who helped me pass algebra sophomore year, Marcus who'd never gotten so much as a tardy slip, Marcus gets 2 weeks of suspension that would definitely mess up his chances of making honor roll this semester. The only difference. Marcus was black, and Jake wasn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, *, can you grab my homework assignments? Don't want to fall behind, *. Even now, even with this completely unfair punishment hanging over his head, he was worried about his grades. It made my chest tight with anger. I'd noticed things before, little things that nagged at the back of my mind but never quite formed a clear picture. Like how Destiny Johnson got dress-coded for wearing the same style of crop top that half the white girls wore without comment. Or how Terrell Washington got written up for disruptive behavior when he asked the same challenging questions in AP history that made teachers praise kids like Connor Walsh for being intellectually curious. But this was different. This was identical infractions with wildly different consequences, and I'd witnessed both. After class, I caught up with Jake at his locker. He was telling Tyler Chin about his weekend plans, completely unbothered by the cheating incident that had cost him nothing more than 5 boring hours in room 204. "Hey Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Heard you got caught with answer sheets Monday. That suck." He shrugged, spinning his combination lock. Williams wasn't too bad about it. Said he appreciated my honesty. Jake grabbed his calculus textbook and grinned. Honestly, I thought I was screwed. But you know how he is, gives everyone a fair shot. Fair shot. I walked away before I said something I'd regret, but Jake's words echoed in my head all day. Everyone gets a fair shot. Right. Tell that to Marcus, who was probably sitting at home right now, wondering how a 2-week suspension would look on his college applications. That's when I decided I needed to start paying closer attention to exactly what kind of fairness Vice Principal Williams was handing out. The lunch table felt different without Marcus. His usual spot next to me stayed empty while I picked at my sandwich and tried to focus on what Jenna was saying about her calculus test. But my mind kept drifting to the conversation I'd had with my mom the night before. "Honey, sometimes these things seem unfair, but there might be more to the story," she'd said while loading the dishwasher. Maybe Marcus had previous incidents, or maybe the circumstances were different. Except I knew they weren't. I'd been there for both. "Earth to Alex," Jenna said, waving her hand in front of my face. "You're being weird today." Before I could answer, Destiny Johnson dropped into Marcus's empty chair. Her usually perfect makeup couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "Y'all hear about what happened to Marcus?" she asked, unwrapping her turkey sandwich with more force than necessary. 2-week suspension, I said. For the same thing Jake Morrison did Monday. Destiny's laugh was bitter. Same energy they gave my brother last year. Remember when Kevin got suspended for 3 weeks for that fight with Brad Sullivan? Brad threw the first punch, but somehow Kevin was the aggressor who needed anger management counseling. I remembered that fight. Kevin Johnson was a senior then, quiet kid who mostly kept to himself. Brad Sullivan had been harassing Kevin's girlfriend, saying things I wouldn't repeat to my worst enemy. When Kevin finally snapped and pushed Brad had swung first. But by the time security broke it up, only Kevin was bleeding. "Wait," Jenna said slowly. "Brad only got suspended for 1 week. And no counseling." "Exactly." Destiny took a savage bite of her sandwich. "Williams told my parents Kevin had anger issues and behavioral problems. Said the counseling was for Kevin's own good. A pattern was starting to emerge, ugly and undeniable." "What about when Aisha got suspended for skipping?" I asked, remembering another incident from last semester. 5 days, Destiny confirmed. Meanwhile, Connor Walsh skips chemistry twice a week to smoke behind the gym and somehow never gets caught. Funny how that works. Jenna looked uncomfortable. Maybe Connor's just better at not getting caught. "Girl, please." Destiny fixed her with a look. "Mrs. Hernandez knows exactly where Connor goes. She's caught him red-handed 3 times. Each time, it's just a friendly warning about attendance policies." I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. When was Kevin's fight exactly? October 15th. Last year. I started typing. Kevin Johnson, suspended 3 weeks, required anger management. Brad Sullivan, 1 week suspension. Same fight. "What are you doing?" Jenna asked. "Keeping track," I said. "Destiny, do you remember any other incidents?" Over the next 20 minutes, Destiny rattled off a list that made my stomach churn. Malik Thompson, suspended for 2 weeks for bringing energy drinks to school, the same energy drinks that soccer players sold openly from their lockers. Nia Foster, written up for excessive tardiness after being late to first period 4 times, while Chelsea Morrison, Jake's sister, had been late to the same class 12 times with no consequences. "Y'all know what the real kicker is?" Destiny said as the lunch bell rang. "Williams is getting some diversity award next month. Saw the flyer in the main office." Celebrating inclusive leadership in education. My pen stopped moving. What award? School boards giving him some fancy plaque at their December meeting. Something about his commitment to equal treatment of all students. Destiny's voice dripped sarcasm. Equal treatment. Right. As we walked to fifth period, I stared at my phone screen, reading through the list I'd started. 12 incidents. 12 times where black students got harsher punishments than white students for identical or lesser offenses. And Vice Principal Williams was about to be honored for his fairness. The cold feeling in my stomach was growing into something fiercer, something that tasted like determination. That night, I couldn't concentrate on my AP history essay about systemic injustice. The irony wasn't lost on me. Instead, I found myself scrolling through the school's website, looking for anything about Williams and his upcoming award. There it was, buried in the News and Announcements section, Vice Principal David Williams selected for Madison County School Board's annual Diversity Champion Award. The article was dated 3 weeks ago, full of glowing praise about his innovative approaches to equitable discipline and commitment to fostering an inclusive school environment. I screenshot the article and texted it to Marcus. He responded within minutes, "You've got to be kidding me. We need to do something," I typed back. Asterisk like what? Who's gonna believe us over him? Asterisk. That was the problem. Williams had been at Jefferson High for 8 years, worked his way up from assistant principal, and everyone loved him. Teachers thought he was progressive. Parents appreciated his firm but fair approach. Even the principal, Dr. Martinez, seemed to defer to Williams on most disciplinary decisions. But Marcus was wrong about one thing: we weren't the only ones who'd noticed. The next morning, I arrived at school early and stationed myself near Williams's office, pretending to study while keeping my ears open. It didn't take long. "Mr. Washington, have a seat," Williams's voice carried through his partially open door. I recognized Terrell from AP History, the kid who asked too many challenging questions. "Sir, I really don't think I was being disrespectful," Terrell said. "I was just asking why Mr. Peterson didn't call on anyone else when Connor kept interrupting." "Son, I've reviewed Mr. Peterson's report carefully. Your tone was inappropriate, and you disrupted the learning environment for other students. But Connor was the one." "Mr. Washington." Williams's voice got that edge I'd heard before, the one that somehow managed to sound disappointed and threatening at the same time. "This is exactly the kind of defensive attitude that got you in here. 3 days in-school suspension should give you time to reflect on more respectful ways to participate in class discussion." Through the crack in the door, I could see Terrell's shoulders slump. 3 days for asking a question about classroom equity. I pulled out my phone and added it to my growing list. During lunch, I decided to test a theory. I walked into Mr. Peterson's classroom and found him grading papers. "Mr. Peterson. I was wondering about yesterday's discussion in AP History. Some people seemed confused about the participation guidelines." He looked up over his reading glasses. "What kind of confusion?" "Well, when Connor kept jumping in without raising his hand, and then Terrell got in trouble for commenting on it." I tried to sound genuinely puzzled rather than accusatory. Peterson's face darkened. Terrell Washington was written up for his disrespectful tone, not for participating. There's a difference between engaging with the material and challenging authority. Right, but what exactly did he say that was disrespectful? He questioned my classroom management in front of other students. That's unacceptable behavior. I pressed gently. So when he asked why Connor didn't have to raise his hand, that was challenging your authority? "Look," Peterson said, clearly getting irritated, "I sent Terrell to Williams because the boy has an attitude problem. Always has. Some students need firmer boundaries than others. Some students." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. "I understand," I said quickly. "Thanks for explaining." As I left Peterson's room, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk, "Hey, heard you were asking about unfair punishments. We should talk. Destiny's friend Aisha, asterisk." My heart started beating faster. Word was getting around. By the time I got to my car after school, I had 3 more texts from students I barely knew, all mentioning incidents, all asking if I was collecting stories. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd been keeping track. The question was, what were we going to do about it? That evening, I met Aisha at the public library downtown, away from school and prying eyes. She'd brought someone with her, a girl I recognized from my English class named Zoe, who was mixed race and usually kept to herself. "Destiny said you're documenting Williams's bullshit," Aisha said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from me. "Good. Someone needs to." She pulled out a composition notebook, its pages bristling with sticky notes and bookmarks. "I've been keeping track since my sophomore year. Started after I got suspended for the skipping thing you mentioned." I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd created the night before. "How many incidents do you have?" 43. The number hit me like a punch. Dating back to Williams's second year here. I started noticing patterns when my cousin Deshawn got expelled. Expelled? My fingers froze over the keyboard. "For what?" Zoe spoke up for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. "Deshawn brought a pocket knife to school. His dad had given it to him for Boy Scouts, and he forgot it was in his backpack. Zero-tolerance weapon policy," Aisha continued. "Automatic expulsion. Except 6 months later, Tommy Chin got caught with the exact same kind of knife. Williams called it a misunderstanding and gave him 3 days suspension." I added it to my spreadsheet, my stomach churning. "Jesus. It gets worse," Aisha said, flipping through her notebook. "Check this out. Last spring, Williams recommended 4 students for alternative school placement. All black. Meanwhile, 3 white kids who'd racked up way more infractions got behavior contracts and stayed at Jefferson." She rattled off names and dates while I typed furiously. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was systematic. Williams wasn't making random biased decisions, he was implementing a deliberate policy of harsher punishment for black students. "Why hasn't anyone reported this before?" I asked. Zoe and Aisha exchanged a look. "Who would believe us?" Zoe said. "Williams is smart about it. He always has a reason, always frames it as being in the student's best interest. Plus, he's got the teachers convinced he's this great progressive educator. My mom tried to complain about my suspension, Aisha added. Dr. Martinez just referred her back to Williams. Said he had full confidence in his judgment. I stared at my screen, watching the numbers grow. 43 incidents that Aisha knew about, plus the dozen I'd documented, plus whatever other students might come forward. It was damning evidence, but Zoe was right. Who would take our word over Williams's? There's something else, Aisha said, lowering her voice even though the nearest person was 3 tables away. My brother graduated 2 years ago, but he still has friends who work in the main office. They told me Williams keeps his own disciplinary files. What do you mean? Separate from the official records. Like, detailed notes about students, their families, their risk factors. Apparently, he's got a whole system for flagging kids he thinks are trouble. The implications made my hands shake. That's profiling. Straight up. Yeah, but proving it is the problem. Those files aren't exactly public information. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything. We had documented evidence of discriminatory punishment, but Williams would just claim each case was decided on individual merit. We had witness testimony, but he'd dismiss it as disgruntled students making excuses. We needed something bigger, something undeniable. The school board meeting, I said suddenly. When is it exactly? December 15th, Zoe said. Why? He's getting that diversity award in front of the whole school board, right? What if we presented our evidence there? All of it. In public, on record, right before they hand him a plaque for treating students fairly. Aisha's eyes lit up. That could actually work. But we'd need more than just our word. I thought about Marcus, sitting at home with a suspension on his record for something Jake Morrison had barely gotten a slap on the wrist for. About Kevin Johnson forced into anger management while his attacker walked free. About Deshaun, expelled for the same offense that got Tommy Chin 3 days off. Then we better start collecting more evidence, I said. And we better do it fast. The next 2 weeks turned into a carefully orchestrated investigation that felt like something out of a spy movie. Aisha, Zoe, Marcus, and I had developed a system. We'd split up during lunch and free periods, casually talking to students who'd had run-ins with Williams, comparing their experiences to similar incidents involving white students. The pattern held every single time. Marcus had thrown himself into the project with an intensity that worried me. His suspension was over, but the anger hadn't faded. If anything, being home for 2 weeks had given him time to think, and what he concluded wasn't pretty. I found something, he said, sliding into the seat next to me in the library. It was Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks before the school board meeting. Remember how Williams always talks about his evidence-based discipline approach? I looked up from the timeline I was creating. We now had 67 documented incidents spanning Williams's entire tenure at Jefferson. Yeah, he mentions it in every parent newsletter. Right. So I did some research on what that actually means. Marcus pulled out his laptop and angled the screen toward me. Evidence-based discipline is supposed to be about using data to ensure fair and consistent punishment across all student demographics. Okay. Look at this. He clicked through several tabs showing academic articles and education policy papers. Districts that actually implement evidence-based discipline track outcomes by race, gender, and socioeconomic status. They're required to report disparities and explain how they're addressing them. My stomach dropped. Please tell me you found Jefferson's reports. That's the thing, they don't exist. I searched the district website, filed a public records request, even called the school board office. Jefferson High hasn't filed a single disciplinary equity report in Williams's 8 years here. I stared at the screen, processing what this meant. So he's been claiming to use evidence-based discipline while actively avoiding collecting the evidence that would expose his bias. Exactly. And get this, state law requires districts our size to file these reports annually. Williams isn't just discriminating, he's breaking state regulations by covering it up. This was huge. This was the smoking gun we needed. Marcus, this is incredible. We need to tell Aisha and... There's more. His voice was grim. I also found the budget for Jefferson's disciplinary programs. Guess how much money the district allocated for alternative education placements this year? I shook my head. $47,000. For a program that, according to Aisha's research, has sent 12 students to alternative school in the past 2 years. 11 of them were black. The math was staggering. Nearly $4,000 per student, and Williams was systematically funneling black kids into alternative programs while keeping white students with similar or worse infractions in regular classes. We need to document this, I said, pulling out my phone. Every number, every regulation he's violated. But as Marcus started reading off statistics, my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood freeze. Asterisk heard you've been asking a lot of questions about disciplinary policies. Might be smart to focus on your own academics instead. DW asterisk. David Williams. The vice principal had somehow gotten my personal cell number and was threatening me. I showed Marcus the message, watching his face go from confusion to fury in about 3 seconds. He's scared, Marcus said finally. Good. He should be. But I wasn't feeling triumphant. I was feeling exposed and vulnerable. If Williams knew what we were doing, who else knew? And what would he do to stop us? My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Aisha, asterisk emergency. Meet at my house tonight. Bring everything, asterisk. Something had gone wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as Marcus and I packed up our research, trying to look casual while my hands shook with adrenaline. Williams knew we were coming for him. The question was, what was he planning to do about it? Aisha's house felt like a war room when Marcus and I arrived that evening. She'd cleared her dining room table and covered it with printed documents, sticky notes, and what looked like surveillance photos. Zoe was already there, along with 2 other students I recognized but didn't really know, Jamal from my chemistry class and a senior named Keisha. We have a problem, Aisha said before we'd even sat down. Show them, Keisha. Keisha pulled out her phone and opened her email. I got this at 4:30 today. She turned the screen toward us, and I read Williams's message with growing dread. Asterisk Miss Thompson, it has come to my attention that you've been discussing confidential disciplinary matters with other students. This violates our student privacy policies and could result in serious consequences. Please see me first thing tomorrow morning to discuss your recent behavior. I trust you'll make better choices moving forward, asterisk. He sent similar emails to 6 other students, Aisha said, her voice tight with anger. All kids who've been talking to us, sharing their stories. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So he's trying to intimidate witnesses. It's working, Jamal said quietly. 3 kids already texted me saying they're out. They can't risk getting suspended right before college application deadlines. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Williams, asterisk Alex, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and your parents tomorrow at 3 p.m. to discuss your recent activities. Please confirm your availability, asterisk. I showed the group, and Aisha cursed under her breath. He's escalating. Bringing in parents means he's serious about shutting this down. What exactly can he do to us? Zoe asked. We're not breaking any rules by talking about what happened. Keisha laughed bitterly. Girl, you think Williams needs actual rules? He'll find something. Disrupting the educational environment, harassment, spreading rumors, he's creative with his write-ups. I stared at the evidence spread across Aisha's table. Dozens of documented cases, state regulation violations, budget discrepancies that painted a clear picture of systematic discrimination. We were so close to exposing everything, and now Williams was using the same tactics he'd always used, intimidation, threats, leveraging his power against students who couldn't fight back. We can't let him scare us off, I said. Not when we're this close. Easy for you to say, Jamal muttered. You're not the one who's gonna get blacklisted from honor society or have your disciplinary record mysteriously develop new infractions. He had a point. Williams had already shown he was willing to destroy students' futures to protect his system. Going up against him meant risking everything, our grades, our college prospects, our standing at school. Actually, Marcus said slowly, maybe this is exactly what we needed. We all turned to look at him. Explain, Aisha said. Think about it. Williams is panicking enough to threaten multiple students directly, in writing. That's not the behavior of someone confident in their innocence. It's witness intimidation, and we have documentation. Marcus was right. In trying to shut down our investigation, Williams had provided even more evidence of his misconduct. Plus, I added, thinking out loud, if he suspends a bunch of us right before the school board meeting where he's getting his diversity award, that's going to look pretty suspicious, isn't it? Keisha was already shaking her head. Y'all are thinking like this is some TV show where the bad guy gets caught because he's too obvious. In real life, Williams suspends us, tells our parents we were spreading lies and causing disruption, and the school board gives him his little plaque while we're sitting at home with disciplinary records that follow us to college. The room went quiet. She was right, and we all knew it. Williams held all the power here. He controlled the narrative, the disciplinary process, even access to the school board. Unless, Aisha said quietly, we don't go through official channels. What do you mean? She pulled out her laptop and opened a new browser window. The school board meeting is public, right? Anyone can attend. They have a public comment period. Yeah, but they limit it to like 2 minutes per person, Zoe said. Right. But what if we had more than just student testimony? Aisha's fingers flew across the keyboard. What if we had community support? Parents, alumni, maybe even some teachers who've noticed the patterns but were too scared to speak up. I felt a spark of hope. You think we could get adults to back us up? My mom's been suspicious about my suspension since it happened, Keisha said. She kept asking why they didn't call her before deciding on 2 weeks for something that should have been a warning. And my cousin Deshawn's mom never got over the expulsion thing, Aisha added. She's been waiting for someone to listen. Marcus was already pulling up the school board's website. The December 15th meeting agenda gets posted 2 weeks in advance. If we can get people to sign up for public comment, Williams won't be able to shut us down without looking like he's trying to hide something. But we'd need to be strategic, I said, my mind racing through possibilities. We can't just show up and start throwing around accusations. We need to present this like the documented case it is. I might know someone who can help with that, Keisha said. My aunt works for the NAACP's education committee. She's been looking for cases exactly like this one. The energy in the room had shifted from fear to determination. Williams might have the power to intimidate individual students, but he couldn't silence an entire community demanding answers. All right, I said, looking around the table at faces that had gone from worried to resolute. Looks like we're really doing this. Aisha grinned. Time to give Vice Principal Williams the diversity education he deserves. The next morning, I sat in the passenger seat of my mom's Honda, staring at the school building and trying to calm my racing heart. She'd insisted on driving me after I showed her Williams's text about the mandatory parent meeting. I still don't understand why you're so worked up about this, Mom said, checking her lipstick in the rearview mirror. Vice Principal Williams has always seemed very reasonable to me. Maybe you misunderstood something. I tried explaining everything the night before, but she kept finding excuses. Maybe Marcus had previous incidents I didn't know about. Maybe the situations weren't as identical as I thought. Maybe Williams had information I wasn't privy to. Mom, I've documented 67 cases. Honey, you're 16. You don't have the full picture that administrators do. She grabbed her purse and opened the car door. Let's just hear what he has to say, okay? Walking into the main office felt like entering enemy territory. The secretary, Mrs. Chen, barely looked up when she directed us to Williams's office. Through his open door, I could see him arranging papers on his desk, preparing for battle. Mrs. Rivera, Alex, please come in. William stood and extended his hand to my mother with that same warm smile I'd seen him use on dozens of parents over the years. Thank you for making time on such short notice. His office was exactly what you'd expect from someone trying to project progressive values, motivational posters about diversity and inclusion, a small rainbow flag on his bookshelf, photos of him with students of various ethnicities at school events. The performance was flawless. I asked you both here because I'm concerned about some behavior that's come to my attention, Williams said, settling behind his desk. Alex, several teachers have reported that you've been approaching students during class time and lunch, asking inappropriate questions about disciplinary matters. Inappropriate how? I asked, proud that my voice stayed steady. Son, student disciplinary records are confidential. Encouraging other students to share details about their punishments, creating lists of incidents, this raises serious privacy concerns. Mom shot me a look. Alex, you didn't tell me you were making lists. It's not illegal to document patterns of unfair treatment. Alex. Williams's tone stayed patient, but I caught the warning underneath. I understand you're concerned about your friend Marcus's suspension. It's natural to want to support a friend. But spreading rumors about bias in our disciplinary system is harmful to the school community. They're not rumors if they're documented facts. Williams pulled a manila folder from his desk drawer and opened it deliberately. Actually, that brings up another concern. I've been reviewing Marcus Thompson's disciplinary history, and there are some troubling patterns. My stomach dropped. What patterns? Well, for starters, Marcus was written up for defiance in Ms. Rodriguez's class last semester. He also received warnings about his attitude in Mr. Peterson's history class. The cheating incident wasn't isolated, it was part of an escalating behavioral issue. That's not true, I said immediately. Marcus has never. Alex, dear, Mom said quietly, how would you know about every incident? Williams nodded sympathetically. Parents and friends often don't see the full picture. Marcus is a good kid, but he's been showing concerning signs of disrespect toward authority. The 2-week suspension was designed to help him reset before these issues became more serious. I stared at him, realizing what I was witnessing. Williams wasn't just defending his decision about Marcus, he was rewriting history in real time, creating a narrative that justified everything. And my mom was buying it. Now, regarding your recent activities, Williams continued, I'm willing to overlook this as teenage loyalty to a friend. But you need to understand that encouraging other students to share confidential information, especially framing it as evidence of discrimination, could result in serious consequences. What kind of consequences? Mom asked, and I heard the worry creeping into her voice. Well, creating a hostile environment, harassing other students for information, making unfounded accusations against staff, these are all potential violations of our student conduct code. Williams spread his hands apologetically. I'd hate to see Alex face disciplinary action when this whole situation stems from a misunderstanding. The threat was crystal clear, wrapped in concerned educator language but unmistakable. Stop investigating, or join Marcus in suspension. I think we understand, Mom said quickly. Alex, you need to apologize to Mr. Williams and promise this stops here. I looked between my mother's anxious face and Williams's satisfied smile, feeling the trap closing around me. In 10 minutes, he'd managed to discredit Marcus, reframe my investigation as harassment, and turn my own mother into an ally. But he'd also made one crucial mistake. Mr. Williams, I said carefully, when you mentioned Marcus's previous incidents, do you have documentation of those warnings you mentioned? His smile flickered almost imperceptibly. Of course. Everything is properly documented in his file. Great. I'd love to see those records, since you're using them to justify his suspension. Williams's pause lasted exactly 2 seconds too long. Alex, as I explained, disciplinary records are confidential. Actually, under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, students and parents have the right to review their educational records, I said, pulling out information Marcus had found during his research. If these incidents exist, Marcus has the legal right to see them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Well, yes, of course, Williams said slowly. If Marcus's family formally requests his records through proper channels. Perfect. I'll let him know. I stood up, ignoring my mother's confused expression. Thanks for clarifying that, Mr. Williams. This has been very educational. As we walked to the parking lot, Mom launched into a lecture about respect and appropriate behavior, but I barely heard her. Because I just watched Williams lie to my face about documentation that probably didn't exist, creating a false narrative to justify Marcus's punishment. And now I knew exactly how we were going to prove it. That afternoon, I met Marcus at the downtown library with a stack of FERPA request forms I printed from the State Education Department's website. His mom had agreed to sign them after I explained what Williams had claimed about Marcus's behavioral history. Defiance in Rodriguez's class. Marcus shook his head, scanning the paperwork. I've never even gotten a warning from her. She nominated me for Student of the Month in October. That's what I figured. Williams was making it up on the spot to justify your suspension. I pulled out my notebook and flipped to a fresh page. But here's the thing, if he lied about your record, he's probably lying about other students' records too. Marcus's mom, Dr. Thompson, looked up from the forms she was signing. You really think he's falsifying documentation? I think he's been getting away with discriminatory punishment for so long that he's gotten sloppy, I said. When parents question his decisions, he just claims there's additional context they can't see. But if that context doesn't actually exist, then he's been committing fraud for years, Dr. Thompson finished grimly. She handed me the completed forms. How many other families would be willing to request their children's records? My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha, asterisk meeting tonight moved to 7 p.m. Keisha's aunt wants to join us. Big developments, asterisk. By evening, Aisha's dining room had transformed into something resembling a legal briefing. Keisha's aunt, Patricia Williams, no relation to the vice principal, sat at the head of the table with a briefcase full of documents and a kind of focused intensity that made it clear why she'd won 3 discrimination cases against school districts in the past 5 years. I've reviewed your preliminary evidence, Patricia said, pulling out a yellow legal pad covered in notes. What you've documented is textbook disparate impact discrimination. But to build a bulletproof case, we need to prove intentionality, not just disparate outcomes. What does that mean exactly? Zoe asked. It means we need evidence that Williams deliberately targeted black students for harsher punishment, not just proof that black students received harsher punishment. Patricia clicked her pen and leaned forward. The records requests are a good start. If we can prove he's been fabricating or exaggerating incidents to justify his decisions, that shows intent. Aisha spread out a new set of documents. I've got something better. Remember how I mentioned Williams keeps separate disciplinary files? We all nodded. Well, I did some digging into who has access to the main office after hours. My friend Destiny volunteers in a guidance counselor's office during 6th period, and she's noticed something interesting. Patricia raised an eyebrow. I hope you're not suggesting breaking and entering. Nothing illegal, Aisha said quickly. But Destiny has legitimate access to student files for her volunteer work. And she's been paying attention to which files Williams pulls most often. She handed Patricia a handwritten list of names. 43 students whose files Williams has accessed in the past month. Guess how many are black? All of them, Marcus said flatly. 38 out of 43. Aisha's voice was grim. The 5 white students on the list. All kids who've been getting into serious trouble, like potential expulsion level stuff. But somehow their files keep getting thinner instead of thicker. Patricia studied the list, her expression growing more serious. This suggests he's actively monitoring and potentially modifying records based on race. But we'd need someone with legitimate access to confirm what's actually in those files. What about the missing state compliance reports? I asked. Marcus found evidence that Williams hasn't been filing required disciplinary equity reports for 8 years. That's administrative negligence, possibly intentional, Patricia said, making notes. Combined with the discriminatory outcomes, it suggests willful avoidance of oversight. Very useful. Keisha spoke up from the corner where she'd been quietly working on her laptop. I found something else. Williams isn't just getting the diversity award next month, he's been nominated for a state-level position. She turned her laptop screen toward us, showing a job posting from the Georgia Department of Education. Deputy Director of Equity and Inclusion. Application deadline was last week. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. He's trying to get promoted, Marcus said slowly. Before anyone figures out what he's been doing here. Patricia closed her briefcase with a sharp snap. Then we better make sure the school board knows exactly what kind of equity expert they're about to honor. The records arrived faster than I expected. 3 days after submitting the FERPA request, Dr. Thompson called me with news that made my hands shake. Marcus's official disciplinary file has exactly 2 entries, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. A tardy from freshman year and the recent cheating incident. No warnings from Rodriguez. No attitude problems with Peterson. Nothing. I closed my eyes, feeling vindicated and furious at the same time. So Williams just made it all up. It gets worse. I compared the suspension paperwork to the official documentation, and there are discrepancies. The original incident report shows Marcus was caught with study notes, not answer sheets. Someone changed the details after the fact. Study notes. The difference was huge. Having notes during a quiz was academic dishonesty, sure, but not the same level as having stolen answer sheets. Williams had escalated the severity to justify the harsh punishment, then invented a behavioral history to make it seem reasonable. That afternoon, I called Patricia with the update. Her response was swift and decisive. We need more families to request their records immediately, she said. If Williams is falsifying documentation, we need to catch him before he has time to cover his tracks. By Friday, we had 12 families signed up to request their children's disciplinary records. But Williams was getting suspicious. During lunch, Destiny cornered me near my locker with troubling news. He's been in the main office every day this week, staying late and coming in early, she whispered, glancing around nervously. Mrs. Chen said he's been updating student files and ensuring compliance with district policies. Updating how? She didn't know specifics, but she mentioned he requested access to the file room over the weekend. Said he needed to review historical records for some report. My stomach dropped. Williams wasn't just covering his tracks, he was actively rewriting them. That evening, Aisha called an emergency meeting. When I arrived at her house, Patricia was already there, looking grimmer than I'd ever seen her. We have a problem, Patricia said without preamble. I reached out to contacts at other schools where Williams worked before Jefferson. Turns out this isn't his first time. She spread out a manila folder containing documents from Williams's previous positions. Lincoln Middle School, 2008 to 2012. Similar patterns of discriminatory discipline. The issue was quietly resolved when Williams transferred to Jefferson. Resolved how? Marcus asked. The family of a suspended student filed a complaint with the state education department. The investigation was dropped when Williams left Lincoln and the family agreed not to pursue further action. Keisha looked up from her phone. So he's done this before, and he got away with it by just moving to a new school. Exactly. And now he's trying to do it again by getting promoted to the state level. Patricia's voice was clipped with professional anger. The December 15th school board meeting isn't just about stopping him at Jefferson, it's about preventing him from taking his discriminatory practices statewide. I stared at the documents, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. This was bigger than just Marcus's suspension or even Jefferson High's disciplinary problems. Williams was a serial discriminator who'd been gaming the system for over a decade. There's something else, Aisha said quietly. She pulled out her phone and showed us a text message. I got this an hour ago. The message was from an unknown number, * drop the investigation or face consequences. Some battles aren't worth fighting, *. Williams? Marcus asked. Has to be. He's getting desperate. Aisha's hands were shaking slightly as she put her phone away. The question is, what's he planning to do next? Patricia gathered up her documents, her expression resolute. Then we better move fast. Because men like David Williams don't go down without trying to take others with them. The records started arriving on Monday morning like evidence in a criminal trial. Dr. Thompson's call came first, followed by texts from 6 other families throughout the day. The pattern was identical and damning, official disciplinary files that contradicted everything Williams had told parents during suspension meetings. Kevin Johnson's file showed no anger management referral, just a single incident report that described Brad Sullivan as the aggressor. Deshaun Williams's expulsion paperwork had been altered after the fact, with pocket knife changed to weapon and accidental possession crossed out in favor of deliberate violation. But the most shocking discovery came from Terrell Washington's mother. "They're trying to say my son has a behavioral disorder," Mrs. Washington said when she called me that afternoon, her voice shaking with rage. "According to his file, he's been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder and recommended for special education evaluation." I nearly dropped my phone. When was he diagnosed? That's just it, he wasn't. I've never taken Terrell to any psychologist. Never signed any evaluation forms. But somehow there's a whole psychological profile in his file dated last month, right after his suspension. This was beyond falsifying incident reports. Williams was manufacturing mental health diagnoses to justify his discriminatory punishments. The implications made my hands shake as I added the information to our growing case file. By Wednesday, Patricia had enough evidence to fill 3 briefcases. She called an emergency meeting for that evening, and when I arrived at Aisha's house, I found her pacing the living room with the focused energy of a lawyer preparing for the most important case of her career. "We've got him," she announced before anyone had even sat down. Falsified incident reports, fabricated behavioral histories, unauthorized psychological evaluations. David Williams has been running a systematic campaign of discrimination backed by fraudulent documentation. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "So what's our next move?" "We present everything to the school board on December 15th, right before they give him his award," Patricia said, pulling out a thick folder. "But we need to be strategic. Williams still has 3 weeks to cover his tracks or retaliate against students." As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, * meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. "Your parents have been contacted. Time to end this foolishness, *. Everyone in the room read the message over my shoulder, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He's escalating again," Keisha said grimly. "Same thing happened to me this morning. Mandatory parent conference about concerning behavior patterns." Aisha checked her phone and cursed. "Me too. And Destiny, and Jamal, and Marcus." Patricia's expression hardened. "He's trying to neutralize all of you before the board meeting. Classic intimidation tactics: isolate the witnesses, discredit their character, make parents too scared to let their children testify." "Can he actually suspend all of us?" Zoe asked. "If he manufactures enough evidence, absolutely," Patricia replied. "Remember, we've just proven he's willing to falsify records. A few more behavioral incidents and suddenly you're all too unreliable to be taken seriously." The trap was brilliant in its simplicity. Williams would suspend the key witnesses for manufactured infractions, then use those suspensions to argue that we were troublemakers making false accusations to avoid consequences for our own behavior. "Unless," I said slowly, an idea forming, "we beat him to it." Everyone turned to look at me. "What if we don't wait for the school board meeting? What if we go to the media first?" Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Think about it. Tomorrow, Williams is planning to call in a bunch of parents and suspend their kids for investigating his discrimination. But if Channel 7 News is already running a story about systematic racism at Jefferson High, those suspensions look like retaliation, not discipline." Marcus was nodding, catching on to the plan. "And if the story breaks before December 15th, the school board can't just ignore it when they're handing out diversity awards." "My cousin works at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution," Keisha said, pulling out her phone. "She's been looking for education stories exactly like this." Patricia was quiet for a long moment, considering. "It's risky. Once this goes public, there's no controlling the narrative. Williams will deny everything, the school will close ranks, and you kids will be in the middle of a media storm." "We're already in the middle of a storm," Aisha pointed out. "At least this way, we're not fighting it alone." I looked around the room at faces that had gone from worried students to determined activists over the past month. We'd started this to help Marcus, but it had become something bigger, a fight against a system that had been failing black students for years while rewarding the man responsible. "All right," I said, meeting Patricia's eyes. "Let's make some calls." By midnight, we had a plan that would either expose one of the most systematic cases of educational discrimination in Georgia's recent history, or destroy our academic careers in spectacular fashion. Either way, David Williams was about to learn that some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. The meeting with Channel 7 News was set for Thursday morning at 9 a.m., which meant I had to skip first and second period. I'd never cut class before in my life, but sitting in the parking lot of the news station, watching Patricia review our evidence one final time, skipping AP chemistry felt like the least rebellious thing I'd done all month. "Remember," Patricia said, adjusting her blazer, "stick to the facts. No speculation, no emotional appeals. Just documented evidence of discriminatory treatment." Marcus sat beside me in the back of her Honda, clutching a folder containing copies of his altered disciplinary records. "What if they don't believe us? What if they think we're just angry students making stuff up?" "That's why we have 43 cases spanning 8 years," Aisha replied from the front seat. "And falsified documents. And missing state compliance reports. This isn't opinion, it's data." My phone had been buzzing non-stop since 7 a.m. with texts from Williams, *Alex, your absence from first period has been noted. Report to my office immediately upon your return, then, this is your final warning before disciplinary action is taken, and finally, your parents are being contacted about your truancy and concerning behavioral changes. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was proving our point about intimidation tactics in real time. Channel 7's investigative reporter, Jennifer Martinez, met us in a conference room lined with journalism awards and framed newspaper clippings. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of sharp attention that made you feel like she was cataloging every word for later analysis. "So," she said, opening her notebook, "you're alleging that Jefferson High's vice principal has been systematically discriminating against black students for nearly a decade?" Patricia nodded and began laying out documents across the conference table. "The evidence shows a clear pattern of disparate punishment for identical infractions, falsified disciplinary records, and deliberate avoidance of state-mandated equity reporting." Jennifer picked up Marcus's file and scanned the altered incident report. Her eyebrows rose as she compared the original, study notes, notation to the handwritten change marking answer sheets. "This is the same handwriting as the administrator's signature," she noted, holding the document up to the light. "When was this modification made?" "Sometime between the initial incident and the parent meeting 3 days later," Marcus answered. My mom has the original email describing the offense as unauthorized notes during assessment. But by the time we met with Williams, it had become possession of stolen answer sheets. Jennifer made rapid notes, then looked up at me. You're the student who initially noticed the disparity. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake Morrison and Marcus were caught with the exact same materials during the same quiz. Jake got 5 days of detention. Marcus got 2 weeks suspension, but only after the paperwork was altered to make his offense seem worse. And you documented other similar cases? Aisha pulled out her composition notebook, now reinforced with duct tape from constant use. 67 incidents over Williams's tenure at Jefferson. In every case where we could compare punishments for identical offenses, black students received suspensions averaging 2.3 times longer than white students. Jennifer's pen stopped moving. 2.3 times longer. You calculated that? Patricia helped us run the statistics, I said. We also found that black students are 4 times more likely to be recommended for alternative school placement, and 8 times more likely to have psychological evaluations added to their files without parental consent. That last statistic made Jennifer look up sharply. Psychological evaluations without consent. That's a FERPA violation at minimum. Patricia slid another folder across the table. Terrell Washington's case. The school added an oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis to his permanent record without ever conducting an actual evaluation or informing his parents. Jesus, Jennifer muttered, flipping through Terrell's file. How many students have unauthorized psychological profiles? 14 that we've confirmed so far, Marcus said. All black males, all diagnosed with behavioral disorders that justify harsher punishment and removal from mainstream classes. Jennifer closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. This is bigger than discriminatory discipline. If you can prove Williams has been falsifying psychological evaluations, that's educational fraud on a massive scale. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Williams, it was my mom. Alex Michael Rivera, you better have a good explanation for why the school just called me about truancy and associating with disruptive influences. Come home immediately, I showed the message to Patricia, who grimaced. He's moving faster than I expected. How many of your parents has he contacted? Aisha checked her phone. My mom's on her way to school right now for an emergency meeting about my recent behavioral concerns. Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened for 30 seconds, then hung up with his face pale. My mom just got a call from Dr. Martinez. Williams told her I've been recruiting other students to make false accusations and that I might face expulsion if this continues. Jennifer was already reaching for her desk phone. I'm calling my camera crew. We need to get to Jefferson High before Williams suspends all of you and claims you're unreliable witnesses. As she dialed, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. In about 2 hours, Williams's carefully constructed system of discrimination would be headline news across Atlanta. But first, we had to survive whatever he was planning to do to stop us. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code, Jefferson High's main office. Alex, Williams's voice was perfectly calm, almost friendly. I think it's time you and I had a serious conversation about your future at this school. The trap was closing, but this time, we weren't the only ones watching. The Channel 7 news van pulled into Jefferson High's parking lot at exactly 11:47 a.m., just as Williams was escorting my mom toward his office for what he described as an urgent disciplinary conference. I watched through the tinted windows as Jennifer Martinez and her cameraman set up their equipment, my heart hammering against my ribs. There, Marcus whispered, pointing toward the main entrance. Aisha's mom just went in. And isn't that Terrell's dad by the flagpole? Williams had orchestrated this perfectly, hoping to isolate us before we could present our evidence publicly. What he hadn't counted on was Jennifer Martinez's crew documenting every parent walking into what was about to become the most scrutinized disciplinary meeting in Jefferson High's history. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, where are you? Mr. Williams is very concerned about your recent behavior, Before I could respond, Jennifer knocked on the van window. Ready? My producer wants us rolling in 3 minutes. The story goes live on the noon broadcast. Patricia adjusted her blazer one final time and gathered our evidence folders. Remember, once we walk through those doors, everything changes. Williams will deny everything, the district will launch damage control, and you'll be under intense scrutiny. Last chance to back out. I looked at Marcus, whose jaw was set with the same determination I'd seen the day he got suspended for something Jake Morrison barely got detention for. At Aisha, who'd spent 2 years documenting Williams's discrimination because nobody else would listen. At the news crew preparing to broadcast our findings to 500,000 Atlanta households. Let's go end his career, I said. The main office fell silent when we walked in. Mrs. Chen's mouth actually dropped open as the camera crew followed us through the door. 3 sets of parents, mine, Marcus's, and Aisha's, sat in the waiting area looking confused and increasingly alarmed. What is this? My mom demanded, standing up from her chair. Alex, why are there reporters here? Before I could answer, Williams appeared in his office doorway. For just a moment, his carefully maintained composure cracked, and I saw something like panic flash across his face. Then the mask slipped back into place. I'm afraid I'll need to ask the media to leave school property, he said smoothly, stepping toward Jennifer. This is a confidential disciplinary matter involving minors. Jennifer held up her press credentials. Actually, Mr. Williams, we're here about your systematic discrimination against black students. Would you like to comment on the falsified disciplinary records we've obtained? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Williams's smile became strained, and I noticed his hands clenched slightly at his sides. I have no idea what you're referring to, he said. These students have been spreading unfounded rumors as a way to avoid consequences for their own behavioral issues. Behavioral issues like investigating racial bias. Patricia stepped forward, her briefcase in hand. Or are you referring to the psychological disorders you've been adding to students' files without conducting actual evaluations? Dr. Martinez appeared from the inner office, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I'm going to have to ask everyone to. Ma'am, I'm Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. The reporter thrust a microphone toward the principal. Are you aware that your vice principal has been systematically giving black students harsher punishments than white students for identical offenses? The parents in the waiting room began murmuring among themselves. Mrs. Thompson stood up, her voice cutting through the noise. Is that why Marcus got 2 weeks while that Morrison boy got detention? I can explain everything, Williams said quickly, but his voice had lost its usual authority. If we could just discuss this privately. Actually, Jennifer interrupted, we'd like to discuss it very publicly. Starting with Deshaun Williams' expulsion for carrying the same pocket knife that got Tommy Chin 3 days of suspension. Williams' face went white. Behind him, Dr. Martinez looked like she was seeing her vice principal clearly for the first time. My phone buzzed with a text from Destiny, *OMG the whole school is watching Channel 7's live stream in the cafeteria. Williams is done, *. The walls were closing in, and everyone in that office could feel it. Williams's composure finally shattered when Jennifer pulled out the stack of falsified psychological evaluations. Mr. Williams, can you explain how 14 black male students receive behavioral disorder diagnoses without their parents' knowledge or consent? She held up Terrell's file, the fraudulent paperwork clearly visible. This appears to be your handwriting on a psychological profile dated 3 weeks after Terrell Washington's suspension. That's, Williams started, then stopped, his eyes darting between the cameras and Dr. Martinez's increasingly horrified expression. David, what is she talking about? Dr. Martinez stepped closer to examine the documents. We don't have a school psychologist on staff. Who conducted these evaluations? The silence stretched for exactly 7 seconds, I counted, before Williams made the worst possible choice. Instead of answering, he lunged toward Jennifer's cameraman, trying to grab the equipment. Turn that off. This is harassment. These students are lying. Big mistake. The scuffle was brief but captured everything on live television, a vice principal physically attacking a news crew while parents gasped and students watched from the hallway where they gathered during the commotion. Mr. Williams. Dr. Martinez's voice cracked like a whip. Step away from the reporters immediately. But Williams was spiraling now, his carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. You don't understand, he said, backing toward his office. These kids have been spreading lies, trying to undermine everything I've built here. The discipline system works. The data shows. What data? Patricia interrupted, pulling out Williams's missing state compliance reports. The equity reports you've been required to file for 8 years but somehow never submitted? Or are you referring to your personal files ranking students by risk factors that coincidentally correlate with race? My mom grabbed my arm. Alex, did you know about this? Before I could answer, Keisha burst through the main office doors, Destiny and Terrell right behind her. Channel 7's live stream crashed the school's Wi-Fi, she announced breathlessly. Everyone's watching on their phones. The hashtag Jefferson High Racism is already trending. Williams's face went from white to green. Social media amplification meant this story would spread beyond Atlanta, beyond Georgia. His state-level job opportunity had just evaporated in real time. Mrs. Martinez, Jennifer continued relentlessly, as principal, were you aware that your vice principal has been systematically targeting black students for harsher punishments while covering up similar offenses by white students? Dr. Martinez looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I trusted Mr. Williams's professional judgment on disciplinary matters. If these allegations are true, they're documented facts, Marcus said, stepping forward with his altered suspension paperwork. He changed my incident report from study notes to answer sheets to justify a 2-week suspension. Same offense, different punishment based on the color of my skin. Mrs. Thompson waved her copy of Marcus's disciplinary records. And he told me my son had behavioral problems that don't exist in any official documentation. The parents began comparing notes, voices rising as the scope of Williams's deception became clear. My mom stared at me with something between shock and dawning respect. Williams made one final desperate play. Dr. Martinez, these students have been truant, disruptive, spreading rumors. They're facing serious disciplinary action that makes their testimony unreliable. Actually, Jennifer said with the timing of a seasoned prosecutor, threatening witnesses is another form of discrimination. We have documentation of intimidation texts sent to multiple students investigating these issues. She held up printouts of Williams's threatening messages, including the ones he'd sent to me that morning. The man who'd spent 8 years destroying students' futures with discriminatory discipline had just destroyed his own career on live television. And we'd caught every second of it. The aftermath hit like a tsunami. Within 20 minutes of the live broadcast ending, Jefferson High's parking lot looked like a crime scene, news vans from 3 different stations, parents pulling their kids out of classes, and what looked like half the school board arriving in emergency session. I sat in Patricia's car with Marcus and Aisha, watching Williams get escorted to his vehicle by Dr. Martinez and 2 district administrators who materialized out of nowhere. His diversity champion plaque was probably getting engraved somewhere across town, completely oblivious to the fact that its recipient had just become the poster child for educational discrimination. Channel 11 just picked up the story, Aisha said, scrolling through her phone. And WSB. Oh my god, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wants to interview us this afternoon. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from classmates, missed calls from relatives who'd seen the news, and 3 voicemails from reporters whose numbers I didn't recognize. But the message that made my hands shake came from Jake Morrison, * holy shit dude I had no idea. I'm sorry about everything, *. Even Jake had figured out that his detention versus Marcus's suspension wasn't about fairness. Look, Marcus said, pointing toward the main entrance. A woman in a sharp business suit was walking purposefully toward the building, flanked by 2 men carrying briefcases. State Education Department. Patricia nodded grimly. Probably the Civil Rights Investigation Team. When discrimination cases go viral like this, the state has to respond fast or look complicit. Through the windshield, I watched my mom talking animatedly with Mrs. Thompson and Aisha's mother. 3 hours ago, Mom had been convinced I was causing trouble over nothing. Now she looked like she wanted to personally file charges against Williams. Patricia, I said slowly, what happens now? To Williams, I mean. Best case scenario for him. Immediate resignation, loss of state certification, and possible criminal charges for falsifying educational records. Patricia's voice was coldly professional. Worst case. Federal civil rights violations, conspiracy charges, and every family affected by his discrimination joining a class action lawsuit. Aisha's phone rang. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, then her eyes went wide. That was my cousin at the Journal-Constitution. The FBI's Education Crimes Unit just opened an investigation into Jefferson High's disciplinary practices. The FBI. Williams hadn't just lost his job, he was looking at potential federal prosecution. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Terrell, *, my mom's lawyer wants to talk to you guys. Says this could be the biggest education discrimination case in Georgia history, *. Marcus leaned his head back against the seat. You realize we just took down one of the most respected educators in the district. Respected by who? I asked. The teachers who enabled him. The parents who believed his lies. The school board that was about to give him an award for diversity. A knock on the passenger window made us all jump. Jennifer Martinez stood outside, her cameraman hovering nearby with equipment ready. Would you mind a follow-up interview? She asked when Patricia rolled down the window. The story's exploding nationally. CNN wants to pick it up for their education segment tonight. CNN. This had gone from a local news story to national coverage in less than 4 hours. There's something else, Jennifer continued. We've been contacted by families from Lincoln Middle School, Williams's previous job. Apparently, your story gave them the courage to come forward about incidents they'd never reported. Patricia and I exchanged glances. Williams's pattern of discrimination hadn't started at Jefferson, we'd just been the first to prove it publicly. As Jennifer walked away to coordinate with her crew, I stared at the chaos surrounding Jefferson High and tried to process what we'd unleashed. Tomorrow, Williams would wake up unemployed, under federal investigation, and facing the possibility of prison time. But more importantly, the systematic discrimination that had been destroying black students' futures for nearly a decade was finally exposed. My phone buzzed one more time. This text was from an unknown number, but the message made my chest tight with emotion. Thank you for fighting for us. Deshaun Williams *. The kid who'd been expelled for carrying the same pocket knife that got Tommy Chin a slap on the wrist was thanking us for finally proving what his family had known all along. We'd won. But looking at the media circus surrounding our school, I had a feeling the real battle was just beginning. 3 weeks later, I sat in the packed Jefferson High auditorium watching the emergency school board meeting that would have been David Williams's moment of triumph. Instead, his empty chair on the stage served as a monument to systematic racism finally exposed. The Diversity Champion Award sat in a box backstage, never to be presented. Dr. Martinez stepped up to the podium, her face drawn with exhaustion. The board has completed its investigation into disciplinary practices at Jefferson High. Mr. Williams submitted his resignation effective immediately and has surrendered his state teaching certification. Scattered applause rippled through the audience, mostly from families who'd spent years wondering why their children faced harsher punishments than their white classmates. Additionally, Dr. Martinez continued, the district will implement immediate reforms. All disciplinary records from the past 8 years are being audited by an independent civil rights organization. Students whose records contain falsified information will have those entries expunged completely. Marcus squeezed my shoulder from the seat beside me. His 2-week suspension had already been removed from his transcript, along with the fabricated behavioral incidents Williams had invented. The district will also establish a disciplinary equity council with rotating student representation to review all future suspension and expulsion recommendations, Dr. Martinez announced. No student will face punishment without oversight from this independent body. I thought about Deshaun Williams, expelled for the same pocket knife that got Tommy Chin 3 days. It was too late to give Deshaun his senior year back, but at least the next student wouldn't face that same injustice. Patricia leaned over from the row behind us. The federal investigation wrapped up yesterday, she whispered. Williams is facing charges for falsifying federal education records. Minimum 2 years if convicted. My phone lit up with a text from Destiny, * Channel 7 just announced Williams got arrested at his apartment this morning. FBI Education Crimes Unit, *. The man who'd built his career on discriminating against black students while accepting awards for diversity was now in federal custody. The irony was almost too perfect. Furthermore, Dr. Martinez said, her voice growing stronger, Jefferson High will partner with the Southern Poverty Law Center to conduct mandatory bias training for all administrators and teachers. We will also publish quarterly disciplinary equity reports, publicly available on the district website. The transparency Williams had spent 8 years avoiding would now be mandatory in public. After the meeting, I stood outside the auditorium with Marcus, Aisha, and a dozen other students who'd risked everything to expose the truth. Local news crews were still interviewing families, but the circus atmosphere had settled into something more like justice. Terrell's mom just texted me, Keisha said, checking her phone. His fake psychological evaluation got him into the gifted program once they saw his real test scores. Turns out labeling kids with behavioral disorders was hiding their actual academic potential. 14 black students had been reclassified from behavioral problems to academically gifted once Williams's fraudulent evaluations were removed. 14 futures restored. My mom appeared beside me, still looking slightly stunned by everything that had unfolded. The school board wants to give you kids some kind of civic engagement award, she said. For exposing systemic discrimination. I laughed, thinking about how we'd gone from potential suspension to civic awards in less than a month. What are they calling it? The Jefferson High Equity Champions Award. Marcus started laughing so hard he nearly fell over. They're literally giving us the award they were going to give Williams. As the crowd dispersed and the news vans packed up their equipment, I pulled out my phone to check the final tally. 67 documented cases of discriminatory punishment. 14 falsified psychological evaluations. 8 years of missing federal compliance reports. 1 federal arrest. And most importantly, 0 tolerance for racism disguised as progressive education policy. Williams had spent nearly a decade systematically destroying black students' futures while being celebrated as a diversity champion. But in the end, the students he tried to silence had become the voices that brought him down. The most racist rule at our school wasn't written in any handbook. It was the unspoken policy that black students deserved harsher punishment than white students for identical offenses. That rule died with Williams' career, broadcast live on Channel 7 News for half of Atlanta to witness.